Got it. Yeah. Speaking of your book, so you're the author of Lost Boy to Awakened Man, the 7-step transformational guide. It's available free in PDF version on your website, and it's also available on paperback on Amazon. Can you can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure, sure. So this is really the core text of what Awakened Man is all about. And obviously the title, From Lost Boy, says where I've come from to the state of the awakened man, quote unquote. And it really charts my journey from a place of being really lost when I was young. And the big thing for me, and why I call it being a lost boy, is that I grew up in a very feminine environment. So my father left the family home, parents got divorced when I was about 10. And then my elder brother sort of took on the mantle of the sort of parental male figure. But without an actual father around, he got himself in all sorts of trouble, fell into drugs, really lost himself in all of that, and really sort of turned on me and my mother, became quite a frightening figure, a scary figure. And then for a long time, that meant I was quite damaged, a little bit afraid, if you like, of authoritative masculine figures, I guess you could say. And this led me to really go into my shell and almost identify more with my mother, because that was sort of a safe place. But of course, as I grew up, I realized that I was, yeah, for want of a better word, lost. I was
Mhm.
overmothered and underfathered. And with that as well, I had a lot of resentment inside of me, especially towards my father and elder brother, which I just hadn't dealt with for a long, long time. And that led me to carrying lots of anger and resentment and getting involved in all that sort of really radical type politics where I thought I was, figuring out the world and putting the world to rights. But I had to really look inside myself and realize that there was a lot of anger and resentment in me first. And then then my elder brother ended up dying from his drug addiction issues. So that was like a real wake up call for me, because I'd had this resentment towards him and we really lost contact and had a very fractious relationship. And then he died. So
Mm.
it was a very tough time, a very strange time. And I had such a mixture of feelings, because one part of me was still really resentful for the way he treated me when I was younger. But another part of me sort of felt guilty and missed my brother and didn't know how to cope with these conflicting emotions. And I did my absolute utmost to sort myself out. I read business books, I learned how to present myself, and I left all of the sort of higher education study into all these radical politics. I realized this just isn't going to help me. I need to sort my life out. And I did everything I could, and I built this persona, if you like, this guy who could wear a nice suit and all that sort of stuff. There's a John Lennon lyric. He says, "You can wear a suit and look quite cute, but you know you can't hide when you're crippled inside." And that's the way I felt for a long time. I was still beneath it all. I was still very lost. But I did everything to fix this external self. And I ended up getting a nice girlfriend and a good job and a flat in London. So on the surface, I'd kind of made it. But within, I was still so broken. And I was just trying to live this false life for a long time. This is the life of the lost boy, as I call it. It comes in many different forms, but essentially, it's where you're chasing external things for meaning. You haven't grounded yourself as a man yet. And long story short, I was in this state for a number of years, and the job I was in was quite a decent job, but it was very stressful, and I wasn't in the right place to deal with it. And then I was in this absolute nightmare relationship, which I may touch on later. I was very obsessive with her, quite needy, didn't
Mhm.
know how to handle myself as a man in the relationship.
We've all been
And it
there.
basically, yeah, yeah. And it led to her seeking, I guess you could say, other options, which really broke me. But I didn't have the knowledge, the skills, the foundation as a man to know that was a boundary I had to put down and walk away. I was still in that lost boy state, if you like, because deep within, I still felt like the child who'd lost his family. That was what was really speaking out of me. That was clinging, to this girl. And I just got really beaten up in that relationship because I couldn't walk away. So I was almost living off the crumbs of it, you know, because she was this hot girl, and I was one of these typical guys. I thought, oh, we've got this magical connection. But anyway, it really was harming me in a big way. And thankfully, eventually she left. She actually moved countries and with her job. And around that time, that's when I had this huge explosion in my life, and everything was just too much. And I ended up in a rehab in the middle of nowhere in England.
Mm.
And
so you ended up getting into drugs a little bit yourself then, or?
Yeah, it was more drinking really with me. It was more
Okay.
drinking. There was a bit of drugs, but it was never really what did it for me. I was more drinking to maintain the facade of this kind of confident guy, you know.
Mm.
And in time, I ended up having this major just breakdown. I thought, I can't do this anymore. And I ended up in this rehab. And it was really more than anything, it was just a place to get away from everything, get away from the work, get away from that relationship, and just start afresh. But something happened to me, man. Like, in going there and it being this, I completely gave in. And when I completely gave in, there was this sense of peace within, you know, very strong, very small, but very real sense of peace right in my gut. And since then, I've become very interested in paths of initiation and spiritual work and men's work. That's obviously what I work in now.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized now that I'd had this kind of transformative experience, an initiatory experience, if you like, where I realized that I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd let go completely. And in the letting go, if you like, I'd opened a deeper part of myself, which was very deeply rooted in something true. And I realized at that point that I wasn't quite in control of my life. And that was a good thing. I'd almost let go of the control, and it allowed me to almost start existing from a deeper plane, you know. Corey Wayne actually talks a lot, especially towards the end of 3% Man, about living out your love and projecting that in your world. And I think that was maybe my first experience of something like that, where I was rooted in something deeper than my ego and my own selfish desires, my fears, my anxieties. I'm not saying it was all magically fixed in a moment. It wasn't. I was still in a bad way. I was still quite fragile, but I knew something had shifted. And with that, I became very fascinated with spiritual work and men's work. And like I say, initiation and transformations and why these things happened. And that took me on this long journey of doing all manner of different types of work. I pretty much did everything you can imagine, tried the lot. And it really worked for me. I really came alive. I mean, I found myself, basically. I found that you can never find happiness outside of yourself. I found that there's a story of life that we're all part of, and it's more about letting go to that rather than trying to control that. Well, at least which gave me peace and gave me direction in life. And as I started to put this together, I became quite interested in people like Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell as well. The sort of writers and thinkers who speak a lot about the principles by which a man finds himself. The hero's journey, I suppose, is the most archetypal example, but there's a process through which a man finds himself, and he almost has to go on this journey of death and rebirth. And I started to read more into this and see that this is cross-cultural, worldwide. Since the beginning of time, this is a story of men. And then I started to see I had not had any experience in my life of anything like that. You know, like I said earlier, there was no male guides, there was no formative figures, there was no one showing me the right direction. So I just fell down a black hole, and I guess you could say I was lucky, or maybe it was fate for me to do that. But it allowed me to go through the experience and find myself. And then I started putting the pieces together, and I realized that I had come back to myself as a man, or found myself as a man via three core principles. Number one was making peace with my earthly father, my actual father, and reconnecting with him as much as I can. I understand that's not always easy for lots of guys, but you do what you can. Then the second step was, as I call it, making peace with my cultural father. I understand people have different political perspectives today, but I'll just leave it as saying that I was very negative towards my country and the values of it. And I think that a lot of that was really coming from my own dislike or distrust or resentment towards my father and elder brother. And once I'd repaired those relationships, I was able to almost make peace with the broader archetypal masculine elements of life, discipline, boundaries, these sorts of things. Started placing those in my life, and I really started to get a lot of structure, a lot of focus, and be able to handle life, be able to be decisive. And ultimately, the last step was making peace with what I call the universal or the divine father. So that's almost like life itself, opening up my spirit to a quote unquote father, which can guide me. Some people may see that as God, some evolution or life itself, however you want to see it. Once I'd implemented those three things, I realized that I was really onto something. And that's when I started my company, which originally was called Recovering Man, because it was about helping men recover from these bad states, as well as recovering the archetypes of masculinity and the rituals of masculine growth. But it's since become Awakened Man. So From Lost Boy to Awakened Man is the title of the book. Okay. And that's, just a quick run through, although I probably went on a little bit too long, but that's a quick run through of what the book's about.